All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here in a 2023 preview and prediction for the Michigan State Spartans. Looking at this coaching staff, Mel Tucker, Jay Johnson, Scotty Hazelton all entered their fourth year together here in East Lansing. 18-14 mark through 3 seasons for Tucker. The Spartans return 14 starters in hopes of getting back to contention. You know, Nick, in 2021, Kenneth Walker arrives from Wake Forest. He puts on a clinic, 1,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, wins the Doak Walker Award, leads this team to a near six bowl. Not only did he get himself paid as a second-round draft pick, but it got Mel Tucker paid as well. Panic move by the school, 10-year, $95 million contract, just to get followed up by a complete disastrous season in 2022 and 2023. We're obviously going to break down this team here in full, but things do not look great for Mel Tucker. He not only had a disastrous season, but lost Peyton Thorne and Keon Coleman, the top returning pass catcher and their top quarterback from a season ago, to the portal late in the cycle. What are your thoughts on the current state in East Lansing? Where just, a couple months ago, back in 2021, things really seemed they were on the uphill. They beat Michigan. They won double-figure games. Right now, they're incredibly gloomy.
Yeah, things are not looking great in East Lansing. It certainly is a problem. Panic move doesn't even begin to describe the 10-year, $95 million to Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker is a great coach, right? Coach under Nick Saban, had a great season at Colorado, really their only great season in the past, 20 years before he took the job in Michigan State. Obviously it started off pretty well, right? 11-2 is a fantastic record, beating Michigan, your rival. It looked like they could be in a playoff potential until they fell apart late in the year. But seeing how much movement happens in coaching carousel, a lot of big names opening, big jobs opening. State panicked and they paid him the money. And at the time, it looked like it was an overpay, but it looked like the right move. After last season going 5-7, it certainly is a concerning thing to see early on in Mel Tucker's career here in East Lansing. I would certainly be concerned. And, that buyout, if they get to that point, is going to be a steep buyout. It's going to be a very expensive buyout, and they're going to have to front that at some point, especially if they have as bad as the season. We think that is certainly possible considering the lack of returning production, losing your starting quarterback and your top returning wide receiver late in the cycle, March, April, sort of late in the cycle, and scrambling to find replacements. It's a tough spot to be in, certainly.
And you look at that offense, 24.4 points per game. The run, offense completely took a nosedive, 111th in the nation. They lost 6 guys in the portal in total. They added 6, 4 of them at wide receiver. They do return 7 starters, but the guys they lose is just too much to overcome, it seems. They lose 3 of the top 4 pass catchers. Tackle Jarrett Horst departs, 119th in FBS and 30-plus yard passing play. So they obviously didn't have much of a downfield unit. You look at the quarterback position, obviously not many people other than State fans will know who these guys are, but I think they have a pretty compelling battle going on here. Noah Kim played in only 4 games, throwing 19 passes. Caden Hauser, 6'3", 205, a 4-star gunslinger from St. John Bosco. Strong arm with some good mobility. Only threw 2 passes a season ago, but was able to learn the system. We also have Sam Levitt here, number 1 player ranked in the state of Ohio, 6'1", 185 pounds, so he certainly needs to add on some size. Levitt's an accurate, mobile passer with a big arm and a lot of upside. So obviously experience here. They don't have much at all, Nick, but I think when you look at some of the scouting reports on these guys, they have some interesting talent that can go around. And Anthony Russo, he transferred in 2021, thought he'd be the starter, and then a young guy named Peyton Thorne came in and was able to win the battle. So I'm kind of sensing a similar QB room here, and Thorne was obviously pretty good in his freshman season, so I'm not really too worried about this quarterback battle here. I think Jay Johnson's going to get these guys right.
Right, this is certainly an interesting battle. I think Hauser's probably the guy I'd go with right now. I think 6'3", 205. The size is too strong for me for him, 4-star, good quarterback. Sam Levitt is a good player, right? I just get a little concerned about the size. I think 6'1", 185 is not quite where I'd want him to be size-wise. I think, closer to that 195, 200 range is kind of where I'd want him. I think I'm going to take Hauser at this point. I think he's got to be the guy to start. I think he is a talented player coming in here. I think the coaching is certainly going to have to play a big role in trying to find their starting quarterback, but this is certainly a battle of 3 players here. All 3 of them have certainly an opportunity to get this starting job.
I was excited for the Michigan State rushing attack. Walker, I thought they would be just as good. 175 yards per contest in 2021. Added Jalen Berger from Wisconsin. Jarek Broussard was the 2020 Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year in that shortened season. They also had a veteran in Elijah Collins. And they were completely the opposite. 3.7 yards per carry for a team. Again, 113 yards per game. They were terrible. Less than 1,400 yards as a team. Walker had more than that by himself the year prior, Nick. This was awful. Jalen Berger, I still think, is a talented player. Patient runner with good explosion upfield due to a crisp plant. Quick feet, nice straight line speed. Doesn't create well but pretty good player overall, 6'1", 215. They added Nathan Carter from UConn, who's been an efficient runner for the Huskies. Jaron Magnum from USF, 6'2", 231. He's a complete bruiser, has 23 career touchdowns. None of these ads here, though, Nick, are really going to, I think, do much for this rushing game. It's going to have to come from creativity and, of course, an improved offensive line. But this was just awful last year. This run game fell off a cliff.
Yeah, this is a disappointing collapse of this running game. Breger is the one guy that returned 683 yards on the ground, 4.6 yards per carry, 6 scores for him. He also had 19 receptions. I think that is important to note. He did have 19 receptions. So he's the real guy to look at here. They brought in some pieces from the portal, but I really just don't think the depth add is going to be enough. I think Carter from UConn is an interesting piece, efficient runner, but outside of that, I think they just have not added enough, and there's a lot of question marks about this rushing attack.
You look at the receiving core, you want to talk about questions, even more here. Trey Mosley's been around for a number of years as a reliable slot option, exactly 35 receptions each of the past 2 seasons. Returning production's thin overall. Tight end Lee Carr, 6'5", 255, with 16 receptions, is the next best. Mo Foster, he had 7 receptions. Alante Brown transfers in from Nebraska. He's interesting, and he's probably starting to crack the rotation. I believe Gurmy Bernard, I believe he may have transferred out, actually. So there's not much here at receiver. They did have a handful of guys transfer in. Brown's going to be the most notable. Mosley, though, he's going to have to be in that 60, 70 receptions this year mark if this passing attack's going to showcase any type of growth.
And Mosley's got to step up big time. He's going to be the huge target here. 35 receptions last year is not a bad number, honestly, to be kind of that third ranking guy. 360 yards receiving, 10.3 yards per catch, 4 scores. But you got to double that number, right, if you're Mosley. He's going to get a lot of targets this year. You got to work on the hands. Mo Foster, I think he's high upside, but just has not seen a lot of catches. He had 7 receptions for about 100 yards, 14 yards per catch, and 1 score. I think Foster will get a lot of attention this year. But overall, this is a very shallow wide receiving core here at all, and it's very, very concerning.
Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed were the top 2 pass catchers a season ago, and they're both gone. Coleman, the Florida State, Reed to the Green Bay Packers. So there's a lot of things here that's going to be concerning. The one good thing I do think going for him is this offensive line. They had some good experience and depth under Mel Tucker his entire tenure, returned 3 good starters. Nick Samick was impressive in the middle, allowed only 1 sack. J.D. Duplain was even better at left guard. Tackle Spencer Brown had his issues at right tackle, allowed 27 pressures. Gino Van D. Mark was a great pass blocker, his limited snaps at right guard. That's Tucker's first high school recruit to start up front. This is his 4th season, Nick. Brandon Baldwin really struggled at left tackle and Horst was hurt. Solid foundation on the interior offensive line. The rest needs to catch up. But again, that point, though, Van D. Mark was, again, Tucker's first high school recruit to start up front. That's not good. That means he walks into a team that was already put together up front, and he's got to be tasked with trying to recruit and replace these guys. And this is the best part of their football team, and it's still not even that great.
I agree. This is the best part of this team by a mile, and it's really not impressive. I think Samick is a good center, good senior leader. Dalton as well on his left flank, and you look at Van de Mark on his right flank. I think those two, that interior is fantastic. Brandon Baldwin and Spencer Brown on the exterior worries me a little bit. I think I feel a little more confident about Brown at right tackle. Baldwin, a lot to be desired. A lot of question marks for me with him. Overall, this offensive line, it's not great, but it's not bad. I think it is this team, certainly the best part of this offense, and that certainly should be concerning if you're a Michigan State fan.
Looking at the Michigan State defense, this is a team in 2021 had 43 sacks. That number took a big dive down to 29. And still, in terms of overall numbers, it's pretty much the same over the past 2 seasons. In the portal, they lost 8 guys, added 6. 4 of them on what's already a pretty deep defensive line, returning 7 starters, lose 3 of the top 4 tacklers, though. This pass defense went from dead last to 87th against in terms of passing yards per game. But they still lack playmaking. They only had 2 interceptions, allowed a completion rate of 66%, which was 123rd. And they also allowed a higher yards per attempt of almost 8. Talking about that defensive line, it's still a really good unit despite losing Jeff Petrowski, Mallory, Jacob Slade. They returned Simeon Barrow, who was a good run stopper, added 6'5", 255, ex-5-star Tumizi Adeli from Texas A&M, an impressive guy with some nice physical tools. Chris Bogle was good in the 4 games he played a season ago. The UF transfer, Maverick Hansen on the interior D-line. Didn't quite emerge as expected last season. I think there's certainly potential there. Liberty transfer, Dre Butler, 6'5", 300. And then Jarrett Jackson is 6'6", 300 pounds. Add more depth and some more muscle to clog gaps here. This was a run defense that was 102nd in FBS last year, Nick. I think you're going to see them climbing into the top 75 this year, even with guys like Petrowski dipping.
I agree. I think there is some potential with this defensive line. I like Dunn. I think he's a solid piece. 28 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Sorry, give me a second. I think Harmon's a very talented piece. 30 tackles last year, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Barrow as well, 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 40 total tackles. I think those guys together, that's a 3 pieces that form a nice core. Solid run stoppers, and they get after the quarterback. I think the trenches are certainly the one part of this team that is solid for Mel Tucker.
I also really like what they have at linebacker. I think this is also a unit on this football team that probably won't get talked about enough. Cal Halliday, an instinctive player, some good strength, a very strong tackler in the box, does well when getting off blocks. Really struggled this past year in terms of just being a consistent enforcer, especially in coverage, but he was a producer for them. Jacoby Wendell primarily played as a defensive end. He can still contribute as a chess piece at weak side linebacker. He was elite in the 8 games he played. Great hand usage, good spin move was on display. Very impressive get off. I like his bend. Does a good job in underneath coverage as well. He was incredibly productive for playing in a lot fewer games than some of these other guys, 49 tackles, and he also had a force with 5.5 sacks, 10.5 TFL, and 5 forced fumbles. This is a player that certainly made some waves. Aaron Brule, he also transferred in a season ago from Mississippi State. Was a poor tackler, but he was still a playmaker at spurts. Some great experience there. Darius Snow, he was good in his lone game of the season. His return from injury is impactful in May. Gatoy is an X4 looking to see the field more. Greatly deep and talented group at linebacker. Overall, I think this is a well put together front 7 that's really going to have to carry this football team this season.
I like this linebacking core. Cal Halliday is a very good player. 120 total tackles this past season, 11 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble as well, win one as well. Solid piece, 50 total tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks for him plus interception. 2 good pieces there. The depth is solid as well. Aaron Brule is a solid player. Zion Young. I'm sorry. Fuck. Let me redo that. Aaron Brule is a solid player. Good recruits they bring in as well. Like you said, I think this is a solid linebacking core. This front 7 top to bottom, I think is improving over time. I think it's a solid group that is getting better.
Looking at the secondary, in 2021, in the weeks leading up to the game against Ohio State, I had pointed out how this secondary was ranked dead last against the pass. I even said that about the game against Purdue before it happened. And Ohio State absolutely throttled them. 56-7 loss. They had 400 passing yards, 6 touchdowns in the first half. C.J. Stroud was putting on a clinic. And that was certainly expected because the secondary all year long was awful. And that was obviously a big focal point coming into the season. And they were certainly better in terms of yards per game allowed. But again, playmaking was not good. 2 interceptions. Talent is still not there at all. Chester Kimbrough and Amir Speed, they're brought in from former Power 5 conferences. We thought they would be good. They weren't really all that good. Speed departs. Kimbrough was probably their best coverage player, but was an awful tackler. Didn't provide anything against the run. Samar Melvin arrives from Wisconsin. He was a solid player this past season. Chance Rucker, a true freshman 3-star from Texas, will likely have to get on the field. Dylan Tatum, Jaden Mangum at safety. They weren't all that great in limited action. Plenty of inexperience between the two. Angelo Gross may play safety or in the slot. He was poor in his own right. And then Charles Brantley, a veteran who's still all around. I don't know what to say about this pass defense, Nick, because coming into the year, we knew it was going to be a big focal point. Mel Tucker just cannot seem to get it right. And I think we're probably going to be proven once more here in 2023 and how poor this back end is, which is just going to be a complete downfall from what is a pretty solid front 6/7.
Looks like it will be a very bad year for the secondary again. Kimbrough did not live up to expectations. Not bad in coverage with 20 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Magnum, I think he's a solid piece, potentially 20 total tackles for him in 8 games. And Tatum as well. He's got some potential. He had 14 total tackles in 12 games. But this secondary is very shallow. Not a whole lot of talent here. I think they will be torched every single week in the fall. In this Michigan State defense, the front 7's great, but I think they'll be let down by a really poor pass defense.
Yeah, the 237 per game allowed, it's still, that's pretty good. I like to see that progression, but I don't know if it's going to be sustainable. Again, 2 interceptions, just horrible. The talent seems to be the exact same it was a year ago. You got to get new faces in there for much to change, and I just don't think it will. You saw against Ohio State, they completed 80% for nearly 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. And the only pick they had was on a miscommunication. But one of the 2 picks they had all year was just on a bad play by the other team. So this is just not a good secondary. Overall, I think this is a very sound defense, though. I'm going to give it a B. I think that what they have on the D-line is really good. I love the linebacking core. Secondary is just terrible. Lots of pain in the back end still to come.
I agree. I think it's a little bit lower, honestly. I think this is a good defense. I'm going to give it a C+. I think the front 7's great. I agree with you there. I think the secondary has a lot of work to be done. They got to find some improvements there. They just did not bring enough pieces for me to improve it to put it at a B.
Looking at the schedule preview and prediction, the Spartans' Mel Tucker extension is on its way to being an awful investment. Run game has collapsed. The best 2 players on offense transfer out very late in the cycle after a poor year altogether by the offense. deep backfield and quality offensive line. They should be better. That's the only hope for the Spartans offense, is that this QB battle can really alleviate any pressure that they're going to have anywhere else. Wide receiver production isn't likely to be all that dynamic. Again, MSU has a great front seven, some good depth and talent. The secondary seems to be a big liability. Good news is, though, the trenches are a strong suit in the physical Big Ten. That's going to give them a puncher's chance on Saturday's, Nick. So that's certainly something to note. 5-7 for me. The host Washington, that could be interesting. But I don't think they're going to have much against either of those teams. Washington, Maryland, they're going to throw it all over them. Maybe they have something against Iowa who doesn't know how to throw the football. They host Nebraska, at Indiana, at Rutgers. I mean, some of these other bottom-of-the-barrel teams, I don't even think Nebraska is going to be a free win. Weeks 1 and 2, free wins there. And then I can't even say Indiana and Rutgers would be free wins. This is going to be a tough year for Michigan State, I believe. But again, in 2021, nobody was really high on them, and they, won double-figure games and made the New Year 6. So which one are you expecting this year?
I certainly think it's going to be a tough season at East Lansing. I have them going 3-9. I think they are going to lose to Nebraska. I think that is not a free win. I think Nebraska is heading in the right direction. I think they're going to lose at Rutgers. It could be a tough time to play out there sometimes. I think Greg Schiano, if he get his fan base fired up, they can win that game. I think the only free wins really on the list are Central Michigan, Richmond, and at Indiana. And even at Indiana, I'm a little cautious saying that because it is on the road. I think 3-9 for this team. It's not an easy slate. In a typical year, it would be beneficial because you host Michigan, you host Maryland, you host Washington. Those could be games if you're a good Michigan State team, you should be winning. Neutral site against Penn State at Ford Field. I do love that Friday night, Black Friday at Ford Field against Penn State. I think that's a great idea from them. I like that a lot. But I don't think it's going to have any advantage for them this year. I think this is going to be a tough year for the Spartans. Mel Tucker's extension is going to continue to look worse and worse. And like I said earlier in the episode, whenever this buyout comes, it's going to be a very hefty buyout, and it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the administration in East Lansing.
They even lost at home last year to Indiana by 7 points, beat Rutgers by only 6, an upset win over Illinois on the road. That was certainly a little impressive. Showcased some good fight late in the year against Penn State, and then they beat Wisconsin by a couple of points. A program that was in turmoil in the middle of the year. So when you look at last year, it's just a very strange year. Certainly put up a good fight in some of these games, but for the most part, shouldn't be losing at home to a horrible Indiana team. They only beat Rutgers again by a handful of points. So yeah, like you said, disaster waiting to happen. It's hard to say much positive here. But again, what they have in the trenches, that can certainly lead to a lot of these teams overlooking the Spartans. So I definitely think that that's important. They have that going for them. But yeah, below 500 season for me. Take the under. It's probably the best bet here. It's going to be for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate joining me, breaking down the Spartans team and discussing this horrible extension.
I absolutely hate to rag on a team, but I think, because I think they are nice in the trenches. I do like that front seven, but I think this is going to be a tough year for Mel Tucker and company. I think 3-9 is where I'm going to settle. It's a tough record. Certainly, Michigan State fans have fall from grace very quickly. Difficult to swallow if you're a Spartan fan.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.